Alright. Bladefall, Blade Blast, Battlemage Inquisitor, build overview. So this is a character that's taking advantage of the reworked Inquisitor from Ritual League. It was one of the ascendancies that I definitely wanted to check out, and specifically the Battlemage node. This was what I came up with to take advantage of it, and I think the builds turned out really solid. So I'm going to throw in a map here first, a quick Shaper Guardian to kind of show it a little bit in action, and then I'll go over the gear, the gems, the passives, all that good stuff. Just a quick what I'm using, why I'm using it. One thing you'll notice, hopefully, is that it's a Blade Blast build, but I'm pretty much just using Bladefall to clear. That's partly just due to how geared my character is at this point. Although you can get away with it pretty well even in lower amounts of gear, and it ends up making the build feel really smooth for mapping overall, especially in combination with something like an explode chest, which are considerably easier to get again thanks to harvest, crafting, returning. Okay, we're already at the boss. The next thing you'll see is it's got some deeps. And I'm on standard because I killed myself in Vaal Temple, so we get all the maps completed. Cool. Yeah, boss image pretty good. Clear pretty good. Defense is pretty decent. We've got about 13.5k total life pool with a whole bunch of regen and stuff. So let's jump into the gear first off, and I'll start with the uniques. The core two being the Vulcanist dagger, which just has a ton of flat physical and flat fire damage to take advantage of the battle mage node from Inquisitor. And then some extra nice bonuses like the 94% physical damage, which is global physical damage, so it applies to our spells. Against ignited enemies, which we can ignite with our Bladefall. The fire damage against bleeding enemies, unfortunately, can't take advantage of it. No way to cause bleed. And then also a giant 198% crit chance on mine and 50% physical converted to fire if you have Avatar of Fire, which in combination with the other key unique, Zoph's Blood, which gives you Avatar of Fire, you have 100% fire conversion, and then this amulet also has just some decent stats in general. And there's a specific reason that I'm using this instead of speccing it on the tree, which I'll get into later, but it's a solid amulet anyway. And for how affordable, at least if you're on Trade League, both of these items are, they are extremely powerful. The other unique I'm using is a Soul Tether, which you don't necessarily need. The build has a lot of sustain already just off the regen. It's just really fun to use because the new Inquisitor's energy shield regen mechanic actually ends up not counting as regeneration. So the way Immortal Ambition works is it's supposed to disable all your ES regen, but since we technically don't have any, you can see that I'm actually sitting at full energy shield in my hideout even with the Soul Tether on, which is pretty nice. But that's it for the uniques. For the rares, it's pretty much just a bunch of influenced harvest crafted pieces. I'll try to really quickly go through how I would recommend crafting them. But starting with the helmet, I've got a Hubris Circlet with a Bladefall enchant. You could get a Blade Blast enchant, probably like any of the Blade Blast enchants are all really good. I think this was the only one that was item level 85 on hardcore trade at the time. And the Bladefall additional volley is solid anyway. But so it's got life, we've got some Fizz taken as fire, some reduced fire res, and crit multi, which are all Warlord mods. The way I crafted this one was I went for the 2 life rolls first, because those are really expensive to do with harvest. And you can see this one's got an essence life roll, so I essence crafted it until I hit a hybrid life. And then if you can fill up the last prefix, either bench crafting something or just getting some sort of removable prefix, you want to either bench craft fire res if you can, or just augment fire to hit the fire res and then augment fire again to hit the minus fire res. You're most likely going to have to do the 2 because the minus fire res is really rare. So that's why it has fire res and the minus aura. And then for the crit multi, you just augment crit, guaranteed. And then you get rid of that last prefix that's not a life roll, however you had it. And you can augment fire again, and you'll get the fizz taken as fire. Overall, gives pretty good damage, utility, defense, all around. The shield is actually one of the more of a pain ones that it was to craft, but that's just because I got mine with +2 maximum resistances. It's not needed at all, really. You could get like a percent life roll, which is really easy to get with a flat life, percent life. You can just like fossil craft it. But the way I got this one was just spamming basically every harvest chaos craft that I had until I hit a life roll and a max res. And then again, harvest craft, augment chaos for the chaos res, fill up the suffixes, augment caster for the spell damage, and I think I used an augment influence to hit the reduced damage from damage over time. Just kind of got lucky to hit a decent one there. Then we got the bench crafted chance to deal double damage since that's really strong. The rings are kind of both similar. You got life, you got minimum endurance charge craft, you got spell damage prefix from Crusader. And then ideally I would have had just one ring with dexterity, but my unset has 12 all attributes, and this one has 42 dexterity because I couldn't get any with a higher dexterity roll. But the main thing is just getting the dexterity out of the way from rings, getting the life, getting the spell damage. And again, other than the dexterity, you can augment caster on prefix. The only two prefixes are spell damage and life gained on hit, which this has both of. They're both solid. This other ring actually has minus mana cost of skills. I bought this as a base with the life roll, and it has the temple mana roll. Alternatively, you could get a ring somewhere or an item somewhere with a little bit of mana regen, because you're probably going to want a little bit to sustain. Or alternatively, again, you could get the boot enchant for mana regen and just sacrifice a little bit of life regen, which, speaking of the boots, we've got Tailwind Elusive, pretty classic combo. Get Tailwind boots, get Elusive boots, Awakener's Orb, and then just hope for the best, really. I think I got really lucky and just happened to hit 30 movement speed with some random craft, bench to the life, augment lightning, augment chaos for the resists. And then the gloves, which this one's pretty important. This is where our Bladefall is. Alternatively, you can put Bladefall in your helmet if you especially wanted to do like an Elder plus Warlord helmet for concentrated effect. It'll give you a single target boost, but I just don't think it's needed. I'd rather have this faster casting for just overall smoothness. But this is the same deal as the helmet. Went for the life rolls first. After that, use augment caster harvest crafts, which the only two caster mods are going to be the faster casting and the crit multi. And then you can remove add and fish for higher tiers. Augment cold for the cold res, and bench crafted the +1 obviously. But the gloves are really strong for the overall mapping feel of the build, because without the faster casting here, the Bladefall can feel quite sluggish, so I think it's really nice to have. And the bonus crit multi on them is an added bonus. And for the body armor, we've got an explode chest that also has frenzy charge on hit, so this is another Awakener's Orb item. Explode from Crusader and frenzy charge on hit from Redeemer. I've actually got the elevated Crusaders because I was able to get lucky with a Maven's Orb that I had found. And then generally you would kind of just try to get any decent life roll. This was one of my lucky pieces where I happened to hit T1 life, I think even on the Awakener Orb. I don't even think I used any harvest crafts for it. And then was able to harvest, finish up the resistances on it. And then the important thing is the bench crafted gain 10% of max life as extra ES, because if you see, even though this body armor only has 200 ES on it, if I take it off, I lose almost 2000 ES. So you definitely want to make sure you have the open prefix to get that, since it's really good for this Inquisitor setup. And then really quickly, the flasks. The flasks you can kind of do almost whatever. Like Diamond Flask is obviously good. It's a crit build. Bottled Faith is insane if you can afford one, just because it's Bottled Faith. Then I've got a Quicksilver, I've got a Basalt, and I've got a Quartz Flask. I was using a Life Flask for a while until I kind of just realized I was never pressing it. So I ended up replacing it with the Quartz Flask, I think, or I might have replaced it with the Basalt. But either way, you don't really need a life flask, and I never felt in danger due to not having one. Even though I did rip the character, I don't think a life flask would have saved me. I wouldn't have reacted quick enough anyway. But you can kind of just put whatever you want there. It's not too critical what you would do on that. And then as quickly as I can, we'll jump through the gems. In the weapon, we've got our Vigilant Strike Ancestral Call. You'll notice no faster attacks, which can definitely feel very sluggish if you don't have things like the Frenzy Charge chest. I've also got some jewels with attack and cast speed rolls on them. The Tailwind essentially gives you some attack speed. But otherwise, it can feel a bit sluggish, and you might want to just save it only for bosses even. It's up to you. And then I've got my 1 Aura Vitality here. I've got Flesh and Stone in this Unset Ring, and Herald of Ash in the Shield, which also has my Castle Damage Taken Immortal Call. In the helmet, we've got a triple Arcanist brand. Arcanist brand linked to Assassin's Mark, Divergent, Purifying Flame. I guess it can just be, doesn't have to be Divergent. And Wave of Conviction. So the reason I have this is because we're using a unique weapon. We can't make a trigger weapon. So this is kind of a one button way to at least get these benefits on like bosses, instead of having to cast a whole bunch of different random spells. And it works pretty well. In the gloves, like I had said, we got the Bladefall, which is linked to Spell Cascade, a low-level Spell Cascade, because the more you level it, the lower the AoE penalty becomes. And you do gain damage, but lowering the AoE penalty means the blades are more spread, which can lower your single target. And the Bladefall does enough damage to clear even with a level 1 support gem anyway. And that's the same reason why this one doesn't have any quality, because the quality also gives it increased AoE, and we just don't want to give too much AoE to the Bladefall. And then I've also got Combustion for the minus res and to ignite, as well as Unleash. In the boots, we've got our Second Wind supporting Frost Shield and Flame Dash, as well as Arcane Surge. Frost Shield's not needed, especially if you're on softcore. You can actually ditch it entirely for our good friend,
You are well?
Righteous Fire. Because even though this build has a Soul Tether on, even though it has a Soul Tether, which causes you to lose 5% of your ES per second, even if I take off my shield that gives me +2 max res and reduce damage from damage over time, we can still fully sustain Righteous Fire. And then you could also have it Vol RF for even more damage boost. But I like Frost Shield. My damage is high enough. Frost Shield's really good against bosses. I'm a fan of it. And then in the body armor, final thing, we've got our Blade Blast, which is linked to Inspiration, LE Focus, Added Fire, Control Destruction, and Fire Pen. And some people do like doing increased AoE on their Blade Blast. I just didn't feel it was necessary. And so I've just stuck with these. You definitely need the Inspiration, even though it's not the biggest damage multiplier, just for the sake of keeping your mana in check. Moving on to the passive tree. Like we had said, it's an Inquisitor. We're using the new Inquisitor stuff, so we've got the Consecrated Ground nodes that were changed up. And most importantly, we've got Battle Mage from Instruments of Virtue, which is what's enabling the giant amount of flat damage from the Vulcanist to apply to our spells. For context, so it's the 163 to 310 Fizz and the 142 to 236 Fire basically become also added to spells, and those combined are the equivalent of, I believe, like 6 tier 1 flat damage to spell rolls on like a rare weapon. So it's got 6 T1s on top of almost 100% increased damage, 200% crit, and fire conversion. It's a pretty good weapon. And then on the tree, actually going through the mana and life side of Inquisitor, partly because life regen is really powerful on this build, thanks to the other reworked Inquisitor node where we get Consecrated Ground causes life regen to also recover ES, so it essentially doubles our regen. So anything we get with regen is essentially doubled. But then we go down through some life regen. We've got the Vigil here, which gives the longer fortify from Vigilant Strike. And then just life nodes, regen down at Marauder. A little bit of dexterity here on precision, and again attack speed to help with our Vigilant Strike. General life damage. And then up here we have a Glorious Vanity with Doriani, which is very key to the build defensively, because not only does it give us over 2,000 energy shield from the 20% life gained as ES, it makes 50% of non-chaos damage bypass energy shield, which is actually good, because if we take half of the damage to life and half to ES, that means both our life regen and ES regen are able to kick in to heal us up quicker, whereas without this it would only hit the ES and half our regen wouldn't be doing anything until the ES got fully depleted. So that's really important. And it's up here because this is like a very unintrusive spot to put this, and it ends up killing Avatar of Fire, which is why we need the amulet. You could put it down here, but I don't like it because it kills these life nodes and it takes out Arcanist Dominion, so you have to get like some really good stuff to, I feel like, make up for that. Then additionally, the one I'm using also has fire damage fire leech, which I believe to be ideal here. It's a pain to roll for though, and if you want to use Soul Tether and you don't want to roll that for leech, you can get a Watcher's Eye or life leech from Vitality, and that was what I was using for a while until I got the right roll there. Other than that, pretty basic stuff. We've got spell crit, jump over towards shadow, life ES nodes, crit nodes, a little bit of AoE, more crit nodes, and again dexterity nodes because we need a lot of dexterity, and they're pretty decent anyway. And then one other thing, I do have a onslaught jewel since I didn't get onslaught any other way. If you end up with boots where maybe you have a life roll on the boots and you can benchcraft movement speed plus onslaught, that would be great, because that would mean you could drop this for another, regular jewel with just damage. And especially crit multi from jewels is really valuable here because we don't have a ton of crit multi. Right now the Blade Blast is sitting at 350%. So you're still gaining quite a lot from crit multi, especially because with everything up, I think our effective crit chance is pushing 95% chance to crit. But that covers the tree just about. Moving on, let's see, we've got real quick Pantheon stuff. Solaris, I really like Solaris on pretty much everything that can take it. And I've got Soul of Growth, since we don't have any dodge or block or anything like that, we are prone to getting hit multiple times in a row. So extra fizz mitigation, especially for that's pretty nice. I'm not worried about any of the degen countering ones. You could take Tukohama to get life regen when you stand still. I just don't think you need to. I wouldn't want to stand still for it, personally. But I think that about covers the whole setup I'm doing. Like I'd said before, if you're on softcore and you want some more oomph, consider putting Righteous Fire in instead of Frost Shield. Or additionally, you can drop the Soul Tether. You don't really need it, because again, I'm sustaining Righteous Fire still right now. So the regen's fine. The sustain is fine. You could, put a Headhunter in if you want a map. Or just really any rare belt with like fire damage and all those influence mods for extra deeps. Something to consider. And real quick, how I recommend to level it would be while you're in Act 1, 2, 3, sub 28, just do Stormblast Mind, Orb of Storms, Frostbomb. It's mostly just Orb of Storms and Frostbomb to clear, Stormblast Mind to kill bosses. At 28, you'll switch to Armageddon Brand and Cremation. You want to do Ignite with Ellie Prolif on the brand. It helps clear really well. And then the Cremation just like damage supports like Ellie Focus Fire Pen to do single target. Very strong combo for leveling that can get you all the way to maps. If you have, the core items, which would be like the dagger and the amulet, you could switch to the Bladefall setup pretty much right away as soon as you can put them on. Otherwise, if you don't have them, one option would be to forego picking up Battlemage temporarily and instead going for something like Inevitable Judgment. And you could play Detonate Dead, which has a very similar playstyle to this. The only difference is this one's kind of nice because you have the ability, once you scale, to kill with just the Bladefall and not have to cast Blade Blast all the time. Whereas Detonate Dead, you kind of always need the 2-button combo unless the density lets you chain. But it's still a very solid build as well. And you can use that to farm up some of the items here. And yeah, I think that's about it. I'm really happy with this build. It's easily the strongest one I've done this league. And it was a ton of fun to play. And I think that's about it. So hopefully it helps. Thanks for watching. And I will see you in the next one. Later.